Good afternoon. Welcome to From Missed Calls to Measurable Growth, brought to you by the team at Peerlogic with our friends at Gen4 Dental. Today, we're going to go through a whole host of items, but before we talk about those things, let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping. First things first, we have a chat. There's a chat window on the right side of your screen. You can see that you can submit any questions throughout the session. There's a Q&A section, a chat. Either one will work just fine. That'll be monitored throughout the session. We will make sure that anything we didn't get to live, we'll get to at the end. And as a reminder that this session is being recorded, so anything that does not get covered live here, or if you have to leave early, whatever the situation may be, this recording will be sent out post-event. So let's talk a little bit about what we are going to cover today. We have a full agenda of really, really good stuff. Excited to hear some of the stories that we have coming here that are real life stuff that you can take back to your practices and hopefully implement. First thing we're going to talk about is where the gap lives. And that gap is typically understood by looking at some data. That data helps us understand what's happening within our practice. Specifically, we're talking about the front desk here. We're going to talk a little bit about the impact, especially on new patients, and the returns that we get from being able to analyze that data. There is a ton of chatter in the space about AI. Everybody wants to know what it is, what it does, how do I use it? Can it solve all my problems? Can I not work anymore and just deploy AI? I don't think we'll go that deep, but we are going to talk about AI. And then we'll jump into a little bit of live Q&A. So who's going to be taking you through this session? I'll start with myself. I am Josh Wagner. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Peerlogic, also a partner with a firm called In Revenue Capital, which invests and provides go-to-market strategy for early stage B2B SaaS and AI companies. I'm really excited to deliver this. I've got a lot of experience over the past year in the dental space, learning from folks like my co-host here, Amy, who I'll allow to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy McNeill. I'm the VP of Marketing at Gen4 Dental Partners. We have about 16, we're in about 16 states, and we have about 100 locations. So I've joined the dental industry about 4.5 years ago. Prior to that, I spent about 6 years at a digital marketing firm in the hospitality space. And, this is really one of my favorite topics because it was a big lesson I had to learn that, joining the dental industry, it wasn't about the paid media. It wasn't about the SEO or the perfect website. It was all about the patient experience. And, so the data I was able to glean that we're going to kind of talk through is really where I spend all of my time in marketing. So I'm excited to get going.
What a segue. Well, thank you, Amy, for joining us. I know you have some really valuable insights that we're going to touch on throughout this webinar, but let's talk about what you mentioned here. Gen4 Dental is roughly 100 and some locations within the space. And when you start to reach that level of scale, some things start happening, right? Things start to break. You start to not understand. You need to get a little bit of clarity around what's going on within this massive portfolio that you've assembled. And let's be fair, right? Like when these things happen, it's not all organic. There's M&A, there's offices that you lose, there's offices that you gain. And every single time one of those things happen, guess what? It comes with new systems, new people, new processes. And oftentimes those things are not congruent with what's happening at the corporate level. So talk a little bit about the decision points that happen within a company like Gen4, where you're like, oh man, we need to really be thinking about this holistically. We can't be doing one-off things anymore. And what is the impact of those type of decisions as you think forward in the business?
Yeah, when I joined Gen4, we had a very strong value proposition that not much would change within the dental practice. And the more I've spent in this industry, I understand that's very common for a DSO to have that kind of message and that stance. But I quickly found that without centralizing things like our phones and being able to understand what's happening with our conversations that we're having with patients, it's just not feasible to enact change and to really understand and help and improve our offices. So about, I would say, 2 years, or maybe it was 3 years, once we had got to about 100 offices. We were about 3 years old. I really pushed for us to have a centralized phone system. At the time, we were on about 15 different phone systems, and only one
Wow.
system even had any type of data. So, I really pushed for this. And, I'm in marketing. Some people don't feel like phones should live in the marketing world. I really had to, raise my hand very loudly and say, I need market or ops support. I need executive team support. We have to have this to make a difference.
Awesome. So that, I want to touch on something that you mentioned, and it is a common thing in the DSO space, the idea that we're not going to change what you're doing in your practice when you join our family, right? That seems to be a very common message. But the flip side of that, change management is often the hardest part of any of these types of decisions. It's not just about the technology change, right? It really becomes about the people in the process and how do we shift people's mindset. So I think it'd be helpful for a lot of people to know, how did those conversations happen to get people on board with this shift? Because you mentioned the visibility, that might be important to you. How do you make it important to them?
Yeah, we started with a beta test. We tested Peerlogic against a competitor for about 6 months. We had about 5 offices on the beta, and just very quickly, just understanding like the missed call percentage, right? We weren't diving that much further than that at that point, but even understanding the percentage of calls that our offices were missing was key. And then we started getting into a lot of just the listening to those calls. We weren't even getting reports or understanding conversions or anything. We were just listening to a few of them and going, oh my gosh, like we've got to kind of step in here. And there's a lot of opportunity to help and train our teams. And so once we had that data, that information, and we could kind of put a calculator together, and I know we're going to walk through that in just a bit, like
Yep.
showing that ROI, especially in DSOs and private equity, like you have to have it. So we really had to kind of get granular with that information, give an ROI for it. And then once we were able to do that, we had a few doctors that got behind it. Once they learned that their offices were not answering the phone or listening to some of those calls, the doctors kind of got, you have those kind of ambassadors within the
That's
organization.
right.
And the ambassadors were able to help us kind of sell it throughout the entire organization. So I understand the world. I understand like it's not just an executive decision. You go in and you just change everybody's phones. It's a huge lift in terms of something like that. But I will say, like the onboarding we had with Peerlogic, I think it took about 6 months. We were launching, 10 to 15 offices a month. It was very,
Yep.
very easy. And I didn't hear any complaints for the team, that it was some big change in their minds. And then we kind of let the data just start filling in without this big training program from the start, right? It was just, let's just change out the phones. There
Right.
was no big training on the data. There was no big training on anything else at that point. It was just, let's just get some centralized data. And we did that for about 8 months. And I think just allowing there to be the phased approach really helped us out.
Yeah, that thought process is absolutely critical because beyond the doctors themselves who are owning their practice and creating those champions, I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle. But then the staff, right? They're already feeling overwhelmed. So that idea of making it simple to start and just giving yourself the opportunity to roll out in tranches different phone systems and then let me collect the data. Let me start to just understand, get my arms wrapped around what's happening here, because that's going to give you the power and the ammunition to go and build those ambassadors throughout the organization that are really, really going to make this thing sing. So I love that perspective. And it's a really good transition into what you find once you have the data at your fingertips, right? We find that, obviously we work with you at Gen4, but we have a few thousand offices within our portfolio as well. And the gap seems to be fairly consistent for when you start to look and analyze the data, the things that are uncovered. So we've got a few numbers here on the screen. I don't want to read all of them. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but what's the narrative behind what you found here?
Yeah, with us, I mean, we really started looking at missed call percentage first because that didn't take any training. It was just answer the phone, everybody. And just the knowledge that we were able to pull that metric. really did decrease our missed call percentage. I think just that knowledge decreased our missed call percentage by, I want to say it was like 2%. And so, that really for us, we were like, oh my gosh, when you're looking at 100 locations, you're missing, I want to say when we did the math, it was like thousands of phone calls. And when we really started getting more granular into new patient phone calls that were just being missed, it
Right.
was like 700 new patients per month.
Wow.
So yeah, and we'll kind of go through the math of what that looks like later on, but that was really like very eye-opening. If we just looked at our missed call percentage, didn't have to worry about trying to train anybody on anything, that's where, as a marketer, I was like, I'm not spending more money until you hit a metric that just says you're answering the phone. That's all I need from you. And
I love
so
that.
that became one of our benchmarks. We were like, answer the phone at this percentage for us. We have a 18%. It must be under 18%. We have some offices that are amazing. It's like 5%, and we have some that are at 50%. So I mean, just when you got that line of sight, you're just like, oh my gosh, how are we missing 50% of our calls? And then as a marketer, you're thinking, I'm spending all this money at this office, and the cost per lead's like $250.
Right.
And it's literally just going to voicemail. And so they're just going to call the next dental practice down the street. And as a marketer, that's just, it's like the worst thing that can happen. So you are just thinking revenue is just walking out the door.
Insane. Well, I do want to unpack something you said right at the beginning, because I think it got glossed over a little bit. But did I hear you right? You said just people knowing that we were monitoring it now gave you an organic lift in missed calls. Am I understanding you right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
We
So
didn't expect that. It was like suddenly all we had done was said, hey, now that Peerlogic is across the board, we have a centralized dashboard. Don't worry about we're looking at it. Don't do anything just yet. Just know it's going to, in the future, it's going to give us this reporting we'll be able to provide you. And once they heard that, it was like an immediate decrease to our missed call percentage by about 2%.
what an incredible data point. I can tell you I've never used that ROI model in selling our solution into the marketplace, but it's certainly something, if not just anecdotal and awesome. Listen, nobody wants to be big brothered, but at the end of the day, if you know you're being held accountable now and there is a way to track and measure that accountability, it's going to have an immediate impact. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So what that leads us into, right? We understand this gap. You're looking at some numbers here that just talk about calls coming in, missed calls, the revenue impact of those missed calls. You are spending money on marketing dollars to drive that impact. The phone rings, the revenue walks out the door. Okay, great. We've got this picture painted, but you have a marketing background. The customer journey, and in this case, the patient journey, isn't always linear, right? It weaves a winding road from time to time. So talk about a little bit the modern patient journey, their expectations, what happens if those expectations aren't met, what is operationally happening within a business, and not just in one practice is one thing, but when you scale that across 100 locations, it really starts to tell an interesting story. So your view on the patient journey and how these puzzle pieces fit together would be super insightful.
Yeah. So for us, when I was really looking at like even just the conversations I was having with the doctors, they would say to me, we're getting low quality leads. And without this data, I really couldn't even, defend our department or defend myself. I would say, well, right now, and things have changed. This has been a couple of years ago. I mean, we didn't have an ROI report at that point. We couldn't even see how the number of leads to the number of appointments and the revenue that was generated. This was 2 years ago. Now we can see this, but at the time I was like, all I could go off is this doctor saying the phone's not ringing, which I had no insight into, and these are low quality patients and you're not driving the right patients. So that's where and why I fought so hard for this data and these analytics. So in terms of that journey, right, you've got the new patient coming in, they're calling in, and if they get voicemail, they're immediately going to another practice, right? And so just making sure that there is all of these things in place. We've got just answering the phone first, right? And then, understanding the different reasons that a patient isn't booking. That was our next layer of data that we were receiving. So we were able to kind of separate it out and say, okay, for our new patients, we aren't converting because of schedule. They can't get in. That was a whole other box that opened up, where it was like we didn't have a line of sight into where our practices were in terms of what we call their third next available appointment. And so as we saw Peerlogic data showing that 38% of our new patients that didn't convert were because of a schedule, this opened up just huge
Interesting.
projects around our scheduling and ensuring that we are getting new patients in within 7 days. And so just when you talk about that patient journey, it's just like making sure that there's access to care. A lot of these insights for us came out of the data that we had with Peerlogic.
Interesting. So every month I track a lot of data across our, DSO customers just to kind of get some benchmarks that I can use in conversations like these. So what I found is on average, and this is not Gen4 data, this is a little bit more aggregate. On average, new patient conversion is about 25%, and existing patient conversion is closer to 50, 60%. So talk me a little bit through, because you mentioned it, the mindset of the new patient, right? You just said they hit that voicemail and they're gone. Are they calling apprehensively? Are they calling impatiently? What is the mindset of that patient who's coming in? I mean, 25% is okay. I feel like there's a lot of room for improvement there, but get me into the head of that patient a little bit.
Yeah. It's funny because prior to seeing the data myself across our organization, I would go into a conference and they would say new patients convert at 70, 80%. And
Oh,
existing patients are like 90%, right? This was a couple of years ago.
that's not what I
And,
see.
I jumped into the data. I was like, we're way off, right? So I was like, at the time, we created a goal. I think we were at about 39%, and we have a wide variety of the types of practices. We have
Right.
very high-end cosmetic, we have perio specialty, we have pediatric, and then we have general. So this is
Right.
combining all data across that whole group. And we were at about 39%. And I was like, even if we got to 55%, then that would be a huge change for us and just so much revenue. Like I mentioned, like the amount of revenue just off of a 2% change in any of these metrics can be just huge across 100 locations. So, definitely if a new patient is calling, they just want to book right away. I think going
Right
back to the
away.
question, like
Yeah.
they've already done the research on the website. They've already read your reviews. You're their dentist down the street and they just want to book.
Yeah.
And so they will just, if they're at the point where they're booking their appointment, they just want to get in. They don't want to wait for a call back. They don't want to wait to get an appointment. They don't want to wait months and months to get in. They want to get in as soon as possible. And so just like
Yeah.
making sure you're clearing out any of the ways that would keep them from booking immediately.
Yeah, I always urge people to think about their own personal life and how you buy things and how you do things and the expectations that the Amazons of the world have set for everybody, right? I mean, you can be on your phone, order something, and it could be on your doorstep within the next 3 to 5 hours. So that immediacy is really ingrained into the culture of our country right now. So if we're not living up to those expectations as a dental practice, saying, just make it easy for me to book, whether it's on the phone, on the website, whatever it may be, just make it easy. So, like you said, you're down the street from me and your reviews are good. Help me help you. Right.
Yeah,
It's that type of
I will
thing.
definitely bring a little bit of my hospitality background in, and
Please.
the fact that, coming from the hotel space, that I spent 25 plus years in, and like I said, 6 in the digital space, really everybody books online. You don't call a hotel to book. And this was 10 years ago,
Right.
you weren't doing that, right? And so because there was that online booking, you were able to see as a marketer the entire patient funnel. Everything was available to you. You knew how many times they visited the website before they booked because it was all online. And when I got into the dental space 4.5 years ago, I remember our, CEO kind of saying, yeah, like if we don't have that tracking. And at the time it wasn't even available to do what's called cross-domain tracking to see that they jumped into the booking engine and converted from a Facebook ad or a Google ad or organically. And so it was really interesting. Our patients don't want to book online. And we're hearing it now with AI. Our patients don't
Sure.
want to talk to AI, right? Like
Right.
it's just the history of the whole conversation is just that's how hotels were 30 years ago, right?
Right.
And so of course people want to book online. Of course they do. I want to, and I'm close to 50, right? Like I want to book online. My dad's, close to 80. He books online. So the whole my patients are too old doesn't really,
Right.
make sense anymore. And so the online element and just being able to make, just like I said, it's answering the phone, answering it as a human, if at all possible, quickly. If not, having AI to do that. Having the ability to book on your website and having the ability to book through your Google My Business page. Like those are like the key pieces, like making sure you're taking away any friction that exists.
Yeah, it's wild when you think about it that, the hospitality analogy is a really good one because the expectation of the consumer is it's all happening on an app, online, whatever it may be. But I think I read the stat that roughly 80% of revenue in a dental practice is still driven through the phone. So it is an important piece of the puzzle. So as we look at the data and we break it down a little bit more, there are some pretty common themes that emerge that you can start to, you know, point at to help optimize what's going on in the front desk. We have a little bit of splattering on the screen here. We can talk through them one by one, but essentially we talk about the idea of intent. So, a front desk person likely doesn't want to be a salesperson, but at the end of the day, they kind of got to play a little bit of a sales role, right? Moving people along, getting that appointment booked. I think follow up again, like in sales, the fortune is in the follow up. They like to say that's likely one of those areas that has to happen. I want you to break down the missed booking opportunities one a little bit, right? Like someone shows the intent, they're looking there, how they do those opportunities, and then the last one here, the procedure misidentification. You start where you want to start, but where do you think the data pointed you the most in your journey?
Yeah, I definitely being able to separate out the new patient versus the existing patient. I know when we were beta testing, like I mentioned, a competitor, they were only looking at the new patient. And so being able to see
Interesting.
both was really important. Once we got to that level, being able to dive into reasons not booked for both new patients and existing patients. And so really like the couple of the biggest that pop out, right? It's like 38% because of them being out of network, not taking their
Hmm.
insurance. So being able to just ensure that there's a very strong, and to your point, sales process to having a conversation. We would immediately have somebody, we'd listen to a few calls and we were just like a little horrified because it would be, the person would say, I'm on Delta Dental. And then it was immediately, oh, we don't take that. And it was just done.
It was it.
All hung up.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, we just paid, you know, $500 for that
To
person who wanted to
acquire.
book.
Yeah.
And we didn't even find out if the Delta Dental had to be, it was even part of the biggest, piece of the decision here. So just really ensuring that you see those reasons not booked, and that we did start to build based off of prioritization, based off of the highest percentage of reason not booked. Another one was people just calling to cancel, and then making sure that you were really training the team. Don't just let them cancel and make it so easy for them. Like ensure that you're really, messaging to them that this doctor has, taken the time out of his schedule to make sure that he's available for you, and like really trying to ensure that they come in if at all possible. So, just those two things, we were like, just those two or two out of four of them already could just shift by like 1 or 2 percentage points, which equals hundreds of thousands of dollars a month.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's one of the reasons why in our dashboard we have this concept of opportunities. And people in healthcare in general get a little finicky from time to time about equating patients to dollars, but at the end of the day, it is a business and that's how it works. But the idea of opportunity identification based on the things that you're talking about, reasons not booked, what are the procedures that are mentioned, what was the objection that came up, being able to dive into those things very explicitly and get some answers to, okay, well, there is an opportunity here. Here's what we heard. We can go back and attack that thing. And the idea of recovered revenue is one that I think is a super interesting concept for the dental field specifically, but then also, as you think about other areas of healthcare where there's application. When you mentioned that, I think insurance is one of the more common things, right? I think it's insurance and scheduling availability are the two that pop up most of the time. I have heard from some offices where, because we can break down the inputs of what insurances are mentioned the most, it could give them the idea where, okay, biannually we evaluate what insurances we cover because we're hearing a lot of this, we don't take it, maybe we should get them in network. Have you seen any of those kinds of decisions happening in your business?
We definitely do a lot with our RCM team, and those types of conversations are happening. We
Yeah,
haven't personally used it or within Gen4 based off of call data from Peerlogic, but we're
yeah.
100%, when there is that need, hey, our schedule is booked out for 6 months, we can't even get new patients in, then it's definitely looking at the insurance based off of those conversations, that look at the data and saying, hey, these are the ones that are paying the least. Let's try to remove this one. This is one where there's more opportunity. Let's make sure that we're making room for those patients. But I don't know that we've used it with Peerlogic data. So it's a great
Oh, it's
suggestion.
more about the data, right?
Yep.
Where you get it is
Yep.
not that important. It's really that you're looking at it, right? Having the
Yep.
ability to make those types of decisions, which I think is super important. Very, very cool. Well, let's take a little bit. Did you have something you wanted to add there?
No, you're good.
Gotcha. Well, let's take a quick poll, see what we got going on here. So AI, we're going to make a little bit of a pivot here. We've talked a lot about data and how we use data within practices for scale, for growth, for capturing missed opportunities. But everybody is talking about AI. They want to know what's going on. How do I use it? Amy even said that you hear the doctors say our patients don't want to talk to robots. I get it. So tell us, how are you using AI in your practices? There's a few answers and responses available on the screen. We're not using any AI to answer or to respond to missed incoming inbound for insurance verification or billing workflows. We're using it across our practices in different, I can't read the whole thing there, but it looks like we've got some responses coming in. Let's give that a few more seconds. You can continue to log that poll responses and we'll probably look at the end. I think that's where we'll get the thing. But right now it looks like we're not using it is tied with we're using it across our different, I wish I knew what that said there. Maybe I can hover over it. Maybe not. All right.
I bet it says in different ways. Let's
In
see.
different ways. Got it. So now it's the leader in the clubhouse at 56%. So we got a little bit of movement in the data. Keep answering that poll so we could see what folks are doing. That'll be super helpful. All right. So switching over to deploying AI within Gen4. How do I get rid of this thing here? There we go. All right. So everyone was talking about it. People don't want to do it. People want to do it. So there's two ends of the spectrum. Nobody wants to talk to AI. Let's not use it. We need to sit in our hands and wait until it gets better. The other side of the spectrum that I've seen is it's going to solve all my problems. Let's just get AI everywhere. But there's got to be something in between, right? And there's a lot of different flavors of AI. But I think the idea that taking your concept of what you did with the phone system early on and trying to not overcomplicate things is what people should be thinking about when it comes to deploying AI. And what does that mean to you? What are some of the use cases that you've thought through, even if they haven't been deployed at this point? And how do you keep it super simple in the minds of the practices that you're working with within Gen4?
Yeah, kind of the phased approach. Of course, it was just centralizing it, then it was accessing the data, understanding, just answering the phone, and then being able to give kind of some training around what we find to be like the largest categories. That's kind of the phased approach. When it comes to how we're using AI in the offices and within our support team, it's across the board. We're using it every day, all day. It's amazing, and I hope everybody is really starting to embrace it. Really ensuring we have online scheduling across the board, ensuring that we have missed calls. So if a call does come in and we can't get to it, that, it either gets, answered by AI voice or it gets, responded to very quickly with the missed call to text. So it's like getting back to that patient before they can even go and find the next dental practice to call, right? It's like it needs to be immediate. And then ensuring that we're communicating with them even post-appointment through AI, and making sure that we're doing all of our appointment reminders, that we're sending out messaging to try to fill our schedule if we see some cancellations come in, utilizing the AI in terms of scans in the actual chair. But we're using it all day, every day in our reporting and everything. So I hope everybody is trying to integrate it as much as they can.
Yeah, it certainly has application across all areas of the practice, and it should be, thought through to where is going to have the most impact on the business as you're evaluating AI. We'll talk through a few use cases here. These aren't necessarily specific to Gen 4, but some things that we see when we talk about not overcomplicating things early on. And since we're talking about front desk and workflows and things like that, I think it's important to go back to the conversation we had at the beginning about change management and fear. When the front desk folks oftentimes have this fear: is it going to take my job? Am I going to be replaced? Is it going to create more work for me? I've heard that several times as well. And I think they're all valid fears because there's so much unknown. So the not a replacement, it's a layer concept is a really good one. And we'll use what we've talked about on this call, the missed call, as that integral point. How can we help support the front desk staff so that if they are talking face to face with the patient in the office, they don't feel obligated to create a downturn in that experience, to answer the phone so that we hit a missed call metric that Amy is holding me accountable to at Gen 4. We know that there's this layer that can help pick up the slack there. And that's one of those areas where you really have to talk through folks with that. And we've seen some success within our portfolio where, listen, this is here to support you. It's not intended to make more work. It's not intended to replace your job. It's intended to give you another set of hands and a tool to help you hit the metrics that we're looking to hit as a business. Now, I've seen a couple of different things happen. One is, depending on the sophistication of the front office people, we've seen folks where they see the AI engage with patients, and sometimes it's through text, it could be through voice, whatever it may be, and they feel this need to jump in and take over because there's this sense of ownership in that communication protocol. And like you said, like, we're training people to do things a certain way. Well, the nice thing is we can train the AI to do things a certain way as well. And we've seen that create almost a disjointed patient experience. Like, oh, wait, I'm doing this, and now someone jumps in. Now the front office person feels overwhelmed because now they're not just dealing with a missed call, they're dealing with a missed call that's now a text message thread over here, where we found other folks just sit and let it go and let the AI do its work and let the validation workflows run their process. And they can sit back and relax and say, oh, wow, that did take this time out of my day. Even if they didn't want to book an appointment, they wanted to reschedule, they wanted to cancel, they wanted to ask for office hours, they wanted to do all these other things. Those are things that that individual didn't have to do. And we find that task handle rate starts to help people feel a little bit at ease. One of the tricks that we found, and I think this even happened, I don't know if it happened within your portfolio or someone else's, where that dynamic was happening. A couple offices were interjecting all the time, and another office was just letting it go and letting it do its job. So we got those peers together, say, hey, talk about how you're using this thing, because I feel like there's some goodness happening over here and maybe some apprehension over here. And once those peers got together, it wasn't coming from you, the head of marketing. It wasn't coming from me, the sales guy at Peerlogic. It was coming from their peer and saying, hey, here's how I'm doing. Oh, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. And then we get valuable feedback. We can optimize the system a little bit too. Maybe we learn something from that that we can optimize how it answers, does responses, how it books, how it does anything like that. And it became a really impactful change management tool for us, which I really liked.
Yeah.
Ah,
And I know you had mentioned kind of at the beginning that, really that fear that it's going to take your job. So I just wanted to kind of touch
yeah,
on that. The way we implement it, it's always better human first. Our
right,
human is interacting with the
100%.
patient when they're calling in. If they're well trained and they're doing their job, that is the best scenario. And so we really go in, and especially when we're launching it at an office, right? You're like, we have the data. They're missing 38% of their calls. Like, 38% of those people are just going to go to voicemail, and you're going to call them back potentially hours later, right?
Right.
And so it's like, so the first thing is just, if you're missing more than what we've kind of, like I had mentioned, that 18%, it's a must, because
Right.
anything more than that, and a lot of, I even want to go lower than that sometimes to as low as like 10% of missed calls, then it gets turned on. But right now, I think we're at about 18%. We turn it on and we deploy it. There's also ways of utilizing it after hours. And we haven't even touched on the fact that, I
Yeah.
remember the number, I don't know if you have it, but it's like 49% of patients book after hours and on
Right.
weekends. And it's like, that employee was not working, right? And so it's like being able to, and we can kind of clean a lot of the spam out too. If they're able to, see that conversation and then call back that patient, and they already have a little bit more information, it's just going to be a more valuable use of time. So it's definitely not, we don't need front desk because now we have AI. That's never going to be the case. It's like, let's make sure that the front desk can actually work with the patient that's coming in the door. Let's make sure that they can take the time to be empathetic when they have like a toothache and an emergency. Let's not make them rushed because the phone's just ringing nonstop. Let's not make
Right.
patients wait on hold while the front desk like manages 5 patients at the same time. Those are the types of things that I feel like AI solves for, turning it on during lunch, after hours, for anybody that was just going to go to voicemail anyways,
That's
right?
right.
And so, yeah, I feel like there's a lot to be done. And I love like the task management piece that you guys have integrated as well.
Yeah. I mean, the approach here is unbelievable, starting with the data. So the fact that you all set benchmarks as a standard for the organization, I don't want to undersell that. That is an incredible asset to the business. And I used to say this when I was in consulting a lot, is like, not having a benchmark is a benchmark in itself. So step one, get the data, benchmark yourself, help understand where we are now, and then look at the impact of changing the data through some sort of tooling or workflowing, whatever that may be, whether it's AI or otherwise. And then you have the ability to specifically measure those things, right? And see what the impact is so you can test and iterate. I mean, I've talked to tons of leaders at DSOs, and they're like, listen, if I expect this to be a magic bullet from day one, my expectations are wildly off. So I want to be working with partners that are going to help me test, iterate. And when things go wrong, okay, let's sit back and evaluate what went wrong. How can we fix it? How can we make it better? And how can we continue to measure the impact and find the sweet spot where we can have the most wins for the organization? Like you said, after hours, that's huge, right? Those people are going to voicemail anyway. How can we change that experience? Do we send them a text? Do we let a robot answer the phone? Like, what do we do? What are those things? How do we test and iterate?
Yeah.
And then I think one of the other things that is important is the idea of understanding the dental space, right? Every industry has its nuances. And I think working with partners that understand those nuances is super important.
Yeah, being able to filter those patients to the right use of AI, right? The right appointment types and the online scheduling, template. They call with an emergency, utilizing those words to get them in ASAP and not just treating
That's right.
everybody the same. We have, like I mentioned, a lot of different types of offices. And so, we've got very high-end cosmetic and a lot of fee for service. And, the type of appointment and the conversion rates, going back to the benchmarking comment, like everything's different for these different verticals within a DSO. And so, when you go into a conference and they're mentioning a conversion rate and you're going, oh my gosh, 80%, is that happening? Really, we're at 100 locations. We have a lot of opportunity to just,
Right.
for us specifically with this specific vertical, and look at the reason not booked. Let's make sure that we create the solution for this large percentage, not every little one-off reasoning, but
That's right.
if we're getting a big, percentage of patients not booking for a certain reason, let's say we now understand that the schedule's the issue, then we dive into that deeper and we realize it's because they're 3 months out. Those are the types of details that the data can give you to kind of change how you're operationalizing the different practices.
Absolutely. Well, let's put some numbers behind this. And this is always one of my favorite things that I talk about with our customers, with our prospects, whoever it may be, is just really the revenue impact of all of this data. And I'm taking benchmark data from across the Peerlogic portfolio. Gen4 is included in that, but this is not exclusively your data. If we do the simple math, right, we take 100 inbound calls a week, we find that the missed call rate on average is about 38%. And patients roughly convert, the new and existing blend conversion rate is roughly 40%. If we take an average appointment value of $300, that's 14 grand a week that's being left on the table, whether you're a private practice or you're a DSO that's compounding that by 100, right? That number gets quite a bit larger. And we saw that in slide one of the $459,000 of missed revenue in a month. That's where it comes from. I mean, the math is relatively simple. We see this across the industry, and it's a legitimate revenue mechanism for a business that is really focused on driving top line acquisition and optimizing the back office to hit the bottom line. So you've got to have both of those levers in the business. And this is a really, really important one. And having the tooling to make sure that those things can be captured is really, really important. We do have a little asset. I think it'll pop up on the screen here that we've created where you can calculate your potential ROI. It's a really cool page. If you click calculate now, it'll take you to a landing page. And on that landing page, there are a whole bunch of sliders. Those sliders represent inputs for your practice, and you can kind of play with them and see, we do this, we do that, we do this, we do that, and it'll really give you a nice little clean revenue output for what the opportunities that are being missed are within your practice. This is the self-guided thing. It's something you can play around with. You can see what the opportunities are, where some of the areas for improvement, and what the revenue impact of that may be. Anything you wanted to add here, Amy?
No, this was like the easiest tool to then convince everybody at the top, right? That this is necessary. And what's difficult a lot of the time is just, okay, now you have this data, but now what are you going to do? How much is it going to cost to like fix any of these things, right? And that's where we kind of go back to just knowing it's being recorded made a shift on its own to probably pay for Peerlogic.
Right.
And then, really, just like those little tweaks that you can make with really focusing on the one or two priority things, like the
That's
very
right.
specific training around cancellations, very specific around out of network. It's not like you then have to go and do a ton of different things with the data. We are probably 12 months into really utilizing the data, and we're still, it's a big thing. It's a big process with a DSO. And so it's kind of just that priority list, and you just work through one at a time, create that training material over time, and it's then utilized for, from then on. And so I do think just being able to get the data, you see the ROI here, which helps you just make that deal to get the data that you need as an operator or a marketer. And then you'll know the direction of where to take it once you have it, right?
Awesome. I totally agree. So we've got a couple minutes here. There's a bunch of questions in the chat, so we're going to get to those things. If you want to jump in on any of these responses, Amy, feel free. Stephen, this is a Peerlogic question. Does Peerlogic use voice AI for missed calls, or does it direct to text as a chat feature? So Peerlogic actually does three different modalities for the AI agent. It has missed call text trigger, which the agent engages with the patient via text. We have a voice AI agent, which can answer the phone or do triage or after hours, whatever the use case may be. It's very use case specific. And we also have our text-based agent available as a web chat feature as well. So Stephen, hopefully that helps. Thank you. David says, great insights, Amy. I've totally agreed. Natalie, we've experienced AI telling our patients that we don't do emergencies and recommending that they go to an emergency room. Thoughts on this? Well, I imagine there's some imperfections all the time. My thoughts are we should probably go back and make sure that we are training the agent to respond the way we want it to respond. I know there are a variety of different use cases, and there are instances where we need to refactor how the agent responds to very specific things. We do have, I don't want to speak for the agentic market in general, but I know we have some specific ways that we can have our agent answer specific types of questions based on different words, phrasing, and things like that. It's a good question, Natalie. Let's see. Peerlogic. Is this compatible with vet clinics, including triage or simply booking appointments? So yes, compatible with vet clinics. Triage, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much. I mean, there could be some very specific custom responses that you build for the agent, but I don't know that I would trust it for full-on triage just yet. All right, any other questions coming in, or Amy, any other thoughts here
Yeah.
before we wrap it up?
We just had, what is the next application of AI that you look forward to deploying? Oh my gosh, I have so many. I'm literally in every version of AI and I'm in it all day. I definitely think there's a lot just in terms of marketing that has to do with the way that we're creating content. That's getting a lot better as we go. And so for me, it's all things data, the level of reporting, the level of analyzing that data, the level of really kind of getting to the nitty gritty, things that are really going to make the biggest differences. So it's like the data, the creative, being able to design websites very easily, being able to create content landing pages very easily. So the marketing world, this AI is like where it's at, right? Like there's everything and it's so exciting and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, there are infinite use cases, and certainly if anyone wants to take a sidebar and wrap on how we use AI in other use cases at Peerlogic or talk to Amy, it's a great segue here. So you can connect with either of us on LinkedIn. I am Josh Wagner, and this is Amy McNeill. Either of us we're both pretty active there, so you can get a lot of our content and understand what's going on in not only the dental industry, but in my case, a little bit broader into the B2B AI SaaS and world as well. If the calculator that you found online is just a little peaking of your appetite, you can also go to our Know Your Numbers analysis. This is something where we leverage our AI insights to really do a deep dive on your data and set those benchmarks that Amy talked about and give you a good first look at what's going on. And we can run an analysis for you to help you understand what it all means. That's one of the important things there. And then finally, if you had to leave early for any time or you want to go back and revisit a concept, please watch the replay. It'll get sent out to you via email. On behalf of Amy, I'm Josh Wagner. Thank you for joining this webinar, From Missed Calls to Measurable Growth, brought to you by Peerlogic and Gen4 Dental.
Thanks, everybody.